Good day everyone, and welcome to Shinryu's Domain. After having our memories rekindled by the wandering minstrel, we find ourselves challenged by the God of Vengeance once again, but this time at the peak of his power. Shinryu's Domain is a mechanically intensive trial, and as such, his abilities are best explained in a timeline format, alongside what other mechanics are executed at the same time. But before we begin, it's important to first clarify a few aspects unique to this trial. In addition to the boss himself, each of Shinryu's wings are also capable of casting spells independently, and in order to keep track of all three entities at once, it's highly recommended to have your enemy list active and easily visible. And while players will find the starting platform to be largely intact at first, certain tiles will inevitably be damaged as the fight progresses. Each tile may be damaged no more than once before breaking, and should the central tile be destroyed, the entire platform will collapse. It'll be up to the players to properly manage which tiles are struck by placing Shinryu's tail slap at desired locations, indicated by a green marker above the targeted player. Provided the tile struck were not destroyed, the tail will remain behind for a short period of time, and killing it will deal a significant amount of damage to the boss. Ideally, players should preserve the tiles closest to Shinryu throughout the fight, which in turn makes maneuvering his other mechanics much more manageable. It's also important to take note of the on-screen progress bar, the Corrupted Aether, and Shinryu's exposed weakness, the Worm's Heart. Shinryu will collect Aether over time, and every time the progress bar completes, he will cast one of his Corrupted Aether spells. If the heart is not destroyed before each cast, the next Corrupted Aether spell will immediately wipe the party. And finally, due to mechanics that occur in the final phase of the fight, it's important to assign each DPS to a tank or a healer, forming 4 pairs in total. More specifically, consider assigning melee DPS to tanks and ranged DPS to healers, in the interest of making stacking easier. Now then, with all that out of the way, let's get started with the fight proper. Upon engaging the boss, players should immediately focus the Worm's Heart, as Shinryu will quickly begin channeling his first Corrupted Aether spell, Earthen Fury, a massive raid-wide attack that always destroys the same 2 arena tiles and damages 3 others. Soon after, Shinryu will quickly refill his gauge to perform Tidal Wave, but not before tethering players of the same role together with burning chains. Be sure to move away from your tethered partner once the chain is formed, and look for the geyser that signals the source of the knockback. And take note that displacement immunity skills such as Tempered Will and Surecast work well to keep you in place. At this point, the first green marker for Tail Slap will appear, this time targeting a healer. To avoid breaking the damaged frontal tiles in our case, the marker is brought to the back of the platform. Before the tail lands, however, Shinryu will summon 3 icicles at the back of the arena that, after a short delay, will charge across in straight lines, dealing damage and knocking back any player struck. Be sure to turn around and finish off Shinryu's tail before bringing your attention back to the boss, and, as always, keep an eye out for his cast bars in the enemy list to anticipate one of 2 upcoming mechanics. Levin Bolt, an ability that deals area damage centered around players and becomes lethal if placed inside any of the water puddles, or Hypernova, a powerful blast that targets a random party member and must be mitigated by stacking with other players inside a water puddle. After a short delay, Shinryu will strike the center of the arena with his telegraphed attack, Dragon Fist, followed by a raid-wide Ice Storm in an attempt to finish off players low on health. At this point, tanks should position themselves closely in preparation for the first Akmorn, and all other party members should be ready to move out of Arkai, a pulsing pillar of energy that targets a random player. Upon filling his gauge once again, Shinryu will cast one of 2 possible Corrupted Aether spells, each interacting with water puddles differently. In the case of Hellfire, players must be standing inside one of them to survive the attack, and in case of Judgment Bolt, the water puddles must be avoided instead. Keep in mind, however, that Shinryu will also use icicles to attempt knocking players around during this mechanic, so be sure to locate them at the back of the arena to avoid being knocked into or out of the puddles. Following a short delay, the second tail slap marker will appear, this time targeting a DPS. Take note of what undamaged tiles remain and choose a suitable location to drop it. Before the tail lands, Shinryu will once again execute Levin Bolt, prompting players to spread out in order to avoid overlapping damage. Watch out for the upcoming tail slap and be mindful of the raid-wide ice storm that follows. At this point, Burning Chains will tether tanks and healers together, and shortly after, Shinryu will mark one healer and one DPS for Earth Breath. These should be taken to opposite sides of the arena, while the rest of the party remains at the center. Soon after, the second Akmorn and its accompanying Akrai will be cast. If available, consider using immunities to solo tank Akmorn, as the following Ice Storm can be particularly dangerous. Once his gauge has refilled, Shinryu will cast Diamond Dust, coating the arena in thin ice. At the same time, Burning Chains will tether the two healers together. It is recommended to simply have one of the healers slide out and back in, to clear this mechanic without major complications. Up next, 4 low-health Reiryu minions will descend upon the arena. These must be healed back to full health before they finish channeling their spells, or each remaining Reiryu will deal significant damage to the entire raid. In the meantime, the third and final tail slap marker should make its way to one of the tanks. Remember to take the current state of the arena into consideration and give preference to preserving the frontal and middle tiles. Once the tail has been dealt with, the third and most troublesome Akmorn will be executed, alongside a rogue set of icicles. If available, tank immunities are highly recommended to bypass this particular set of mechanics. With this gauge filled once again, Shinryu will proceed to execute Aerial Blast, slowly knocking players away from the center and culminating with a powerful knockback at the end of the cast. At the same time, all 4 DPS will be tethered together with Burning Chains, so plan your escape route accordingly. After another brief delay, 1 DPS and 1 healer will be once again marked for Earth Breath. These marked players should proceed to the edges of the arena just like before, or the ice storm that follows is sure to cause problems to the party. At this point, Shinryu will take to the skies, and after a short time, proceed to dive across the center, before landing once again. Upon his return, players should be ready to either spread out for Levin Bolt or stack inside a water puddle for Hypernova, followed by one final Akmorn and Akrai. And with his bar filled one last time, Shinryu will begin channeling Tidal Wave once again, but before running towards the geyser, players should spread out to avoid overlapping damage from the Levin Bolt that occurs at the same time. Following the knockback from Tidal Wave, or upon reaching 44% health, Shinryu will imprison all players with Dark Matter, prompting the end of Phase 1. To clear the active time maneuver comfortably, players should be ready to repeatedly hit at least 2 keys at once, such as left mouse click and spacebar, or you might find it to be a fairly close call. Phase 2 begins with the party being propelled into a new arena even higher above, and after a brief delay, Shinryu himself will follow suit. Players must brace themselves at the edge of the platform so that the landing impact knocks them into the next one. Shortly after, the party will be met with the first wave of Shinryu's minions, each landing at their respective impact zone. The main tank should quickly establish aggro on the Hakin Ryu spawning in the center, and use a cooldown to mitigate its death sentence. The second wave functions similarly, but this time including 2 Hakin Ryu minions. As before, have the main tank pick up the one at the center, and the off tank pick up the one at the edge. In the third wave, however, players must place meteors manually, and preferably as close to the edges as possible to minimize incoming damage. Thankfully, this time there will be no Hakin Ryus present. Once all minions have been defeated, healers should use their defensive spells to mitigate the upcoming raid-wide Protostar, which deals damage depending on how long the party took to clear the minion phase. At this point, players must position themselves close to, but not inside, the indicated blue impact zone, as Shinryu will extend his tail and invite players to return to the main platform. The party must be sure to sprint past his tail together, as the boss will attempt to stun players with a barrage of green lasers, and those who fall behind are likely to be struck. Phase 3 begins once Shinryu retracts his tail, and his first mechanic to watch out for is Terra Slash, a powerful attack that deals heavy damage to the main tank and applies vulnerability, prompting an immediate tank swap. Terra Slash will always critically hit, meaning awareness is extremely useful to mitigate its damage. The party markers we set up at the beginning of the fight will come in handy at this point. Shinryu will tether all players with burning chains, and mark each DPS with Atomic Ray, a stacking mechanic. Once the chains have formed, each pair should run to their assigned spot, breaking their respective tethers and satisfying the stacking condition for Atomic Ray at the same time. At this point, Shinryu will cast Ice Storm, which now has the added effect of freezing stationary players, and combine it with either a delayed Levin Bolt or Hypernova. In the case of Levin Bolt, players must keep moving around the same spot to avoid being frozen, and once Levin Bolt has finished casting, move away from their previous locations. On the other hand, if Hypernova is being cast, players must remain still and be frozen on purpose, as it prevents the upcoming fire damage from becoming lethal. Up next, Shinryu will cast one of two possible abilities. Benigning Breath, an extremely wide attack that shouldn't be difficult to avoid if players remain close to the boss. Or Worm Whale, where players must collapse to the very center of the arena and under the boss to avoid being struck, and quickly move back out once the cast has finished. Before proceeding any further, Shinryu will target the current main tank with the next Terra Slash, and shortly after, a new set of Reiryu minions will appear, functioning exactly like the ones from Phase 1. After a moderate delay, these mechanics will repeat, but upon reaching 22% health, blue spring pads should appear around the arena, allowing the party to ride on top of Shinryu. Upon landing, players will find both wings to be casting spells, which should be focused down before each cast completes. If you haven't yet, using your limit break here is highly recommended. Once the wings have been destroyed, simply jump back down to the platform and deliver the final blow to the God of Vengeance.